This video is a follow-up to the previous two I did concerning beets and using them as natural dye. This time around, I want to see what it takes to get the color to stay in the fabric. So let's take a look at the process. Something that I didn't necessarily do the first two times that I dyed with beets was pay a lot of attention to the Mordanting process. So right here, I'm making aluminum acetate, and you can watch the video I made on how to do this. I read somewhere that aluminum acetate plus tannin would be a good combination when using cellulose fibers. So rather than use just alum or just use tannin, I'm going to combine the aluminum acetate. I'm going to soak the fabric in aluminum acetate and then tannin to hopefully create a better bond for the color. Right here, I'm just making the acetate. I'm mixing the solution that I made with store-bought alum to finally make aluminum acetate. And as I mentioned, I have a video that I'll link on here where you can see how I did this. I want to try and create the best bond possible, so I'm taking these steps to see if that will help with beets, because the color from beets tends to want to fade away or wash out pretty quickly when you just rinse it. So we'll see how this helps, or if it helps at all. I dissolved some aluminum acetate in warm water, and right here you see me just putting the fabric in and moving it around a bit to get it fully coated, but I'm going to leave it in here for a period of time. Since the seeds and skin of avocados are known to have a high amount of tannin, that's what I'll be using for this process. Now this color is really nice. It's what you might expect when you boil beets. Very pretty color. For some reason, I tend to let dye sit for a day or two before I get around to actually using it, and some of the nice tone that was originally there has started to go away, and you can see that in this segment. This is 1 or 2 days later and the color has started to change, so that's gonna affect how the fabric turns out, and you will see in just a moment how this fabric dyed with beets will be a color completely different from what you might expect. So as you see, this is brown, completely unexpected from the way that the color initially looked. And when it turns out this way with beets, I have to question whether or not I accidentally got some iron in there, something rusty, one of my utensils that I used to mix with. Because if you watched my first video, you saw how the color was completely changed just because I used a rusty tool to cut the beets up. It completely changed the color of the dye, and that's the influence of iron. But I'm not sure that happened with this one. I believe that it just turned this brown color. So I'm gonna do another experiment and try to achieve the original color of beets. So now I'm just going through the process again of soaking fabric preparing it to be dyed using tannin solution and the aluminum acetate solution. And this is a scrap piece of fabric. You'll see some thread on there. That's just the turquoise color. I was using it to fix my tension on my sewing machine, so it's just a scrap. So if you notice the thread, that's why. So I'm just soaking it in the aluminum acetate, and I'm actually pouring some of the tannin solution in there with it. I just try different things and see what happens. So I had already soaked it in the tannin as well. And so this is the outcome the second time around. I only let it soak for 1 day. I didn't give it 2 or 3 days so the color wouldn't transform. You can see how it turned out. And so my next step is to see what happens when you rinse it. So my idea that pre-treating this fabric with a mordant and tannin to maintain the color did not work out. However, you see it's still holding on to some of the pink color. I've done this before and all of the color washes out and the fabric is its original off-white color. This is a comparison of one that was rinsed and one that wasn't. So I'm just going to go ahead and conclude that using beets on cellulose fibers is not the way to go if you want to retain color. Now, if you do want to retain color, you can just not rinse the fabric after you dye it and you'll have something like this, or maybe this if you end up with brown. But I've experimented with this a few times. I've used a mordant as well as a tannin in combination to try and see if I can get the color to stay in the fabric even once it's rinsed. And I have not had success with this. I know of people who dye wool, which is a protein fiber, with beets and the color stays. So dyeing with cellulose fibers is a little bit different. You have to kind of work with some dyes, not all. You have to really work to get the color to stay in the fabric. And that's what I've learned through this experimentation with beets, is it just takes, an alternate way of relating to the fabric. So if I want to dye something with beets and have it keep the same color, the original color, then perhaps my solution would be to not rinse it at all and maybe use the pieces of fabric in a project that does not need to be laundered on a regular basis or at all. So that's kind of what I'm concluding. This all started because I had beets in my refrigerator that were going bad. I may revisit the topic of dyeing with beets, but I feel like I've learned a lot doing it these 3 times, and hopefully it was helpful to you as well. If you have any questions about this process, or if you'd like to share about your experience dyeing with beets, please feel free to leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.